Welcome to AUA Leadership in Business, an official podcast of the American Urological Association.
Welcome to the AUA Leadership in Business podcast, where urologic professionals experience the practical application of business acumen essential for success in today's dynamic professional landscape. I'm Dr. Jennifer Miles Thomas, and in today's episode, we will discuss finding your first practice, the business of career decision making for trainees. Joining me today is our special guest, Dr. Seth Cohen. Dr. Cohen's practice is focused on urogynecology and reconstructive pelvic surgery at City of Hope in Southern California. He is the immediate past chair of the AUA Young Urology Committee. Welcome, Dr. Cohen.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me, Dr. Miles Thomas. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining us. Well, this is a very important topic. We know about the workforce issues, and it's great to really support those trainees as they move into their professional careers. So let's start from the very beginning. What should a trainee initially consider when crafting this job strategy, this job search?
Right. So I think there's a few parameters to really take into consideration. I like to think of three things. So salary, otherwise known as dollar bill and money, patient population, and then geography. So geography, patient population, and salary. I think those are three parameters that someone has to really consider. What's the most important to me? It's going to be different for everybody because whichever variable or variables that is, that's really what has to guide your decision making and guide your focus and investigation as you're seeking out opportunities. If you're geographically restricted to the West Coast, you're automatically understanding that you're not even going to be looking on the Eastern Seaboard or on the Midwest. If you know that you have a particular subspecialty in mind that you've done fellowship training in, that you really want to focus on, you're not going to be looking at practices that are going to be mostly general urology. If you have a certain salary in mind that you've just been dreaming of, and we can talk about that, that's a bit of a moving target these days. You're going to have a bar in mind, and if there's a number given to you that just doesn't seem right, you're going to immediately walk away from that opportunity. So these are just parameters that almost by default will automatically guide the initial part of your search for your destiny and your job. Hopefully that'll provide a lot of fulfillment.
So that makes sense. So as you know, there are quite a few opportunities available all across the country for either graduates coming directly from residency or fellowship trained urologists. So what you're saying is basically figure out what's important. You're going to be bombarded with so many opportunities, but in order to make it really work and to make the best decision, figure out what's most important for you and let that guide your decision making as well as your strategy for finding the first perfect job.
Exactly. I think the summation is you can't have it all. I mean, you love to have it all, but in truth, if you get two out of the three, you're probably winning the game. There's unicorns. There's always opportunities where you might be able to get everything all in the perfect job, especially when you're coming out though, and maybe you're not known to the world. You don't have a lot of seniority. Your name isn't quite established in the professional practicing urology world yet. I think you're going to be lucky to get two of the three and then grow from there and then perhaps ultimately have all three. But it's not going to start like that.
Well, is there anything else that you should consider? Like, I know some people come out single, some people are married, some people have partners. That's a lot in one, but how important should that be?
Well, your partner, if you're fortunate to have a partner, that 100% should be a part of the discourse and discussion. And it's two lives together, and a lot of your decision making is going to be guided by the co-happiness of your partner and where do they envision themselves, his or herself. And that only happens with talking it out. Hopefully you've had that discussion and you're not looking at jobs in Texas if your significant other has no desire to live in Texas, or not to pick that state in particular, but really just as an example, anywhere in the country, any particular environment, urban, rural, the partner that you have is half of your happiness. And so you guys really have to have an understanding about where are you going to work and live together, that it's going to make sense for both of you to thrive. Hopefully that goes without saying, but you never know. Sometimes it doesn't go without saying. Our partners tend to give up so much in their life for us in the medical world as we go through training and multiple hours at all, call and everything else. And sometimes we just almost presume a little bit that our job priorities will be paramount. but certainly as you get to a life where you're going to be actually making money and have a salary and hopefully provide for those that you care for, it's perhaps the most important to have the input of those you care for and your partners in that decision making.
That makes complete sense. It seems like you're looking for the best balance, right? Of the best balance of the opportunity, which is going to be personal. And I think a lot of times we hear, oh, someone got a great job at X, Y, or Z, but that may not be the great job for you
Mhm.
until you really recognize what does your partner or what do you really want? Location, money, practice type. There's a lot to consider and it sometimes overwhelming. So I'm really happy that we're having this conversation so people can kind of start working through it to figure out what their best opportunity is. Well, if we actually talk about it, how would you even find these opportunities? I mean, how what would you recommend that a trainee or someone who wants to switch jobs or a brand new job, coming out of fellowship, coming out of residency, how should they begin their search?
As I was going through this journey, I really took an all front attack, and I think it's different for everybody. Some people are very focused. I think one of the absolute strategies is networking, particularly in the AUA section you're a part of. If you have an interest in staying in that section, so the sectional meetings are fabulous places to network and really see what opportunities may be opening up at institutions in the region or large urology practices or small practices in that particular part of the country. That the sectional meetings are a little more intimate, they're a little smaller, and it's a really great place to meet people, talk, have those opportunities to exchange information about what jobs may be on the horizon. So I would encourage you to network at AUA sectional meetings. I think perhaps goes without saying, network amongst the colleagues at your training institution. The professors, the assistant professors, the chair, they're connected. They know what's out there. And so certainly seek their guidance. Give them a sense of what you're looking for ahead of time. I'm always a little mystified that someone may get to the end of their training and their peers and colleagues still don't quite know what they're looking for in a job. I would make that known. There's no reason necessarily to keep that a secret. I would be fairly transparent with the people you work with because they can be some of your best advocates, particularly if you've done well and you've impressed them. They want you to succeed. They want you to have a great job. It's really behooves them to see you do well. I think another important opportunity is the AUA JobFinder. The AUA website has an excellent exchange with job postings that is it's almost like the Reddit of urology jobs. I mean, it really has everything on there, and you got to sift through it. There's some filters you can apply. Certainly, though, there's lots of opportunities on there. I wasn't above cold calling. I would say that especially if you're geographically restricted, often the best jobs may not be the most advertised. And if you have a particular area, if you really want to be in the Chicago region, in a particular suburb, call some of the practices in that particular area. Just say, hey, listen, my name's Dr. So-and-so. I finished this training. I did a fellowship, right into a fellowship. I'm curious, are you looking? And have an updated CV ready to go. Email the CV to the practice manager and say, listen, wanted you to have a copy of my CV. I'm looking for job opportunities. Could you forward this along to the head of the practice or to the practice director, and let me know if someone's interested in a conversation? I certainly got a phone call or two just from that, and engaging in conversation and just getting the discussion and exchange happening. Sometimes people aren't necessarily looking for urologists until they find the right person. And it's amazing how opportunities just are created out of thin air if it's kismet and they really feel a connection with you and perhaps the services you could provide. There's always need for urology. We're so busy. It really is amazing how sometimes jobs that don't exist appear within a couple of weeks and they're there. And I think the other thing to be aware of is when you're looking at jobs, be kind to everybody. Uh, don't. It's kind of like urology interviews. When you're walking through interviews in residency, you always make sure you are kind to everybody. Number one, that's the way it should be in life. But number two, urology is a small world, and if you're talking to someone, do it with respect. Make sure they understand that you want their time to be meaningful, and you're not trying to waste their time. And don't be flippant or inconsiderate in your communications with them, even if there isn't necessarily a job opportunity there.
Yes, urology is a very small world. Let's talk about networking for a second, because I think that's challenging for some. Most of us have gone through, usually straight through all of our educational training. And so it was kind of stepwise fashion. This is the first time you're really going out into like the wild real world and trying to figure out how to forge relationships with people you don't know and you have no authority whatsoever. So any tips on just how to network? Because I guess physically, yes, you can talk to people at the section meeting, but for those of us who aren't as kind of outgoing, it's a little bit intimidating just to walk up to people and socialize. You know the people in your program, but they're not always the people who are hiring. So any tips? You're a very sociable person. You're very outgoing, and I think you network very, very well. So any tips or suggestions?
Yeah, it's all about common doors and commonality. And so one of the best ways is to have a colleague or a friend that is at least partially familiar with someone you'd like to meet and have them make an introduction for you, whether that's an email or a text. Text works well. Hey, Dr. So, and have them include you. Hey, Dr. So and so, wanted to introduce you to John. John's one of my colleagues. He was a year behind me in training. He's finishing his residency next year. Just wanted to establish a dialogue. That's the easiest way to network is a colleague to have an informal introduction in a unintimidating way. And that could be a text, that could be perhaps a phone call, that could be an email. Those tend to be the easiest ways. Now, once that connection is made, you have to jump on it. Don't respond. Don't let a couple of days go by. That colleague's doing you a favor. So you want to be respectful and you want to immediately engage with the person you're trying to connect to and demonstrate your enthusiasm for that connection. I would say another way to network is when you go to these meetings and there's commonality in region or there's commonality in background, whether you trained at the same institution or you're both practicing in the southern part of California, bring that up. Say, hey, Dr. So and so, I noticed that you're training you trained in LA where I'm training right now. How was that experience for you? Start a conversation about a similarity, in your background or in the type of practice you want to have or perhaps in what you want to achieve in the future. Find a kernel of information that you both can immediately have a discourse about, as opposed to an awkward silence or a kind of a hi, my name's Seth, and then just leave it there. You want to have an immediate conversation starter. And the easiest way to do that is similarities in training, similarities in geography and practice, similarities in subspecialty, just to get the door open. And then I think another way to network is inevitably just to really recognize the value you bring in a humble way. And so that I don't really love the terminology humble brag, but you listen, you've done training for 5 to 6 years. You're an intelligent person, perhaps more than that if you've done special fellowship and subspecialty training. You're bringing something, you have something to offer the urological world. And you want to make that known. You walk up to someone who's at a large practice, say, hey, Dr. So and so, I'm finishing my specialty training in urogynecology and reconstructive pelvic surgery. I'm really excited to get out there and offer these services. Do you have an opportunity? And so that's an opportunity to really advertise yourself, once again, in a humble, non-intimidating way, about the particular unique skill set you're going to bring. Maybe it's HOLEPS. Maybe it's being the fastest terper at your residency. Maybe it's someone who, loves treating orcalgia. Whatever you think you're going to be special or passionate about, bring that to the front, make it known, and use that as a little bit of an opportunity to sell yourself in a conversation as a conversation starter when looking for opportunities.
Thanks for those tips. I mean, if that makes it feel a little bit more obtainable, a little bit easier, and not as threatening just to kind of introduce yourself to people you don't know but may have heard of in the past. Well, thank you. Well, what other resources are available? Because literally being in practice is different than residency and fellowship. That somewhat of that protective layer is gone. So what would you recommend as someone's transitioning out?
I would absolutely recommend consideration of the to practice urology manual. Now, what is that? Well, that just happens to be the electronic manual that is available by PDF through the American Urologic Association Young Urology Committee. And it's a wonderful PDF. It's not huge, it's very navigable, it's very pertinent for trainees looking for their first job, or perhaps even just young urologists in their career transitioning jobs. And it talks on a fairly high level about contracts, negotiation, what to consider when you're asking about job opportunities, and you could really skim it and have a lot of knowledge within a very short period of time. And that's something you can find through the AUA website. Other opportunities are platforms where doctors are on, and maybe this also kind of links in with the networking question you asked, Dr. Miles Thomas. Opportunities to network and get knowledge about jobs on Doximity. LinkedIn. Those are platforms that are generally have job seekers and have information about job opportunities, and also sometimes even have information that are helpful about starting your first job or succeeding in your first job. So I think those are platforms that can be helpful. I think talking amongst your peers is always welcome. There's the Young Urology Forum, which happens at the AUA meeting every year, and that's a real nice opportunity just to meet young urologists. I think going to some of the review courses, whether you're reviewing for part one of your boards or even for oral boards, that's really cool because it's a microcosm of your peers, generally young urologists, that either are still seeking their perfect job or perhaps have their first job. And it's just an unusual chance for everybody in a kind of age category to get together and have a discourse.
Yeah, that's helpful. But one of the things that you mentioned was just like, let's say LinkedIn and social media. It's kind of a mixed bag. I think a lot of us are on Twitter, some people on Insta and LinkedIn. I just can't say as personally as a resident that I was ever on it, but it's really changed networking and it's maybe a little bit easier to network on it. Would you recommend that people start a profile? Because I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
I agree with you. It's almost coming to the point now where I think as a young urologist, if you're not on, X, formerly known as Twitter, you may be missing out on some really great opportunities, even just from a knowledge basis. Because so much now of journals and training opportunities are on there. That's where people learn about it first. And so when someone tells me I'm not on social media, I don't want to be on social media, I completely get it. It can be a time suck. Honestly, there's sometimes offensive material on there, which is horrible, but there is a lot of exchange. For some reason, the urology world has really just latched onto X. And it is, I talk to other specialties like, I've got colleagues in, OBGYN and vascular surgery. And I'm like, are you guys on X? I'm like, not really. We do it a little bit. For some reason, the world of urology loves these platforms of X. I mean, Instagram maybe too. I don't know, Jennifer, I'm not on Instagram as much. A little bit. Um, but there's just so much opportunity, even just from a knowledge exchange that happens on X, that I think as a trainee, as a young urologist, it behooves you to be on it. It behooves you to be on it. And job opportunities too, networking, as you point out as well. A direct message on X has helped me establish a few connections I never would have had otherwise, for sure.
Well, that's great advice. Just, I mean, I think it's a little bit, I mean, no one wants to be the keyboard warrior, right? But it's a little bit safer just to reach out on X and DM or whatever the new term is. I don't even know if it's still DM or not, just to get a response. And then it's a little bit safer to make that first connection. So thank you for the multiple ways, the myriad of ways that people can reach out in kind of a safe space as they learn to network in these social kind of climates.
For sure.
Well, everything has been very, very positive so far. Now, what should we look out for? What are the potential pitfalls that are out there with your job search?
Yeah, I would just protect your investment. Your investment has been your time and your life. You've put a decade into this, med school, residency, perhaps fellowship, perhaps not. And this is one of the most important decisions you're ever going to make is the job you take. Now, the good news is you can always change. And many urologists do. That's not talked about. But many urologists do make job changes, certainly within the first 5 to 7 years of practice. But you want to think about this in a way that is going to allow you to maximize your potential, earning potential, quality of life potential. And there's lots of different job opportunities: private practice, small group practice, large urology practice, private equity backed, not private equity backed, academic, not academic, employed, Kaiser model, not a Kaiser model. The list goes on and on and on. And we could have a whole discussion for an hour about those different job opportunities. But I think as you're looking into a job, try to talk to the people in the practice. So certainly you're going to talk to the practice manager and you're going to talk to whoever is going to make the decision about hire or not hire. But really try to get a sense of the esprit de corps from the people in the practice. You want a generally happy group, or at least a group that finds joy and satisfaction in coming to the job. You want people that connect. I think some of the more depressing thoughts is going to a job where people don't talk to each other and they're kind of siloed in their little tract and there's no interaction amongst your colleagues. We're learning more and more that peer interaction is absolutely essential to being satisfied with your job and have a joy in the practice of medicine. Um, I think if there's turnover, if you notice that the reason they're hiring is because they've had a number of urologists leave, or they keep having a urologist leave, ask yourself why. Why is this job open? Is it open because the practice is doing so well because they're rapidly expanding? Is it open because the population just has a need? Is it open because a couple of urologists left and they may have had reasons why? And find out, try to ask why they left, try to understand that, just so you have a personal sense of why. And I think the other thing is overpromising. Be leery if someone overpromises you the world and says this is an amazing job, we're going to pay you $1 million, you're going to love it, it's going to be fantastic. It's not true. I hate to tell you. And Dr. Miles Thomas can comment. It's just, listen, residency's hard. It doesn't get a whole bunch easier in practice. I'd love to tell you it did. In ways, it's more satisfying because it's your patients. They care about you. They recognize you as their physician, but it doesn't get a whole lot easier. In some ways, it gets harder. And so I think you really have to have the fortitude to realize that if someone's promising you rainbows and a pot of gold, that's also something to question. It's going to be hard work, meaningful work, valuable work, but it's going to be hard work no matter which way you cut it.
I completely agree. If it's not in the contract, verbal promises these days don't really hold anything, hold water. So yes, I agree. Rainbows and unicorns may be rolled, and then someone may roll out the red carpet, but it's the culture of the group. It's the culture of the practice. Figure out if you fit well with that group, and anything that's really a priority for you, make sure it's in that contract. Otherwise, there's a lot of change, a lot of things get gotten a few years later. No one remembers that comment. So just make sure it's all in writing. So anything else that you would recommend? So if I was I don't know, let's say I'm 35, this is my first, I'm about to graduate, I'm not doing a fellowship, this is my first foray, I can live anywhere. It just feels overwhelming. There's so many opportunities. I have a framework and a structure right now that we just finished discussing, but how do I get past the fear of making a mistake? What if I choose poorly? How do I know if it's a bad fit? And then how do I have the confidence to make a change?
So if there was something I would not do, it would be to give your contact information to very enticing recruiters. Nice people, probably trying to do their best to fill jobs. You will forever be called and texted for the rest of your life. Perpetuity, forever. And I don't have a good way around that. I mean, they do serve a role. Certainly, if you're interested in locums, I think recruiters are fabulous. There's a lot of people out there looking for locums opportunities. When it comes to permanent jobs, the challenge is once they have your information, they keep calling you no matter what. And I try to remove myself from those, and they just keep calling. There's not a perfect answer. I can't tell you. I wish I could even say that it was worth it. When I did it, I was looking for jobs. I'm like, maybe I'll get something out of it. I didn't get anything out of it. None of the jobs really fit what I was looking for. And so I don't want to completely discourage you from engaging with recruiters. There may be a role for that. But I will say, as a urologist, there's just so many job opportunities as is. I don't necessarily know that a recruiter is going to provide a whole bunch of value for you, to be honest.
Well, also, if you make a decision and you move forward with a certain opportunity, how would you recommend that people kind of reevaluate that? You mentioned earlier that people do switch jobs, usually 5 to 7 years out, but that takes a lot of courage. I guess it's really trying to understand what you want and then trying to find that out there. It's a pretty hard transition. Um, we don't get a lot of guidance about that. And I know a lot of people have changed roles, especially post COVID. There's been a lot of change. But how would you recommend that people reevaluate themselves? Because they may have changed also.
This is such an important point, and I appreciate you bringing it up. There was a discussion about the 7-year itch. Dr. Perazio brought that up at the Young Urology Forum. There comes a time in a career when you look around and you say, is this it? Maybe that happens in our personal relationships as well. We perhaps ask ourselves that as well sometimes in relationships. Is this it? Am I engaged in the practice of urology the way I thought it was going to be? Am I caring for the patients I want to care for? Is my salary what I want it to be? Is my geography what I want it to be? In some ways, it goes back to our very initial point that those three things, geography, practice, population, salary, am I hitting all of those targets? And can I envision myself being happy here for the next 30 to 40 years? And I think we all have to ask ourselves that question at some point. I asked myself that question, and I was ultimately happy with where I was. And I think you have to ask yourself that question as well along your journey. I think the people that get burned out are missing something there. One of those parameters is not being fulfilled in a meaningful way, or perhaps all of them are not being fulfilled. If you wake up in the morning and you're scared to go to work, if you wake up in the morning and you just are so unhappy going to work that you would rather just stay home and keep your head in the pillows, if you're so unhappy at work that you come home and you find yourself lashing out at your family or loved ones for really unusual or unknown reasons, you have to ask yourself, am I in the right practice? Urology is a joyful profession. It is such a meaning. We make so much difference in the quality of life that for the people that we treat, whether it's cancer surgery, whether it's pelvic floor surgery, stone surgery, whatever it is, we make such a difference. And we have the opportunity to really care for patients over decades and establish relationships. We should be one of the happiest specialties. We should really be the specialty that is most prideful in what we do. So when I see those burnout numbers, I'm always asking, gosh, what's going on? And so we have to ask ourselves that if you're not happy going to work, or at least excited to go to work, or take satisfaction in the work you do, for me, that's a little bit of a wake up call that you need to ask yourself, am I in the right practice?
Oh, that's helpful. And I mean, I think it's good that we're verbalizing it, because what we were talking about was finding your first practice, but that doesn't have to be your forever practice. And I think that's just helpful so that people, I mean, we need urologists, we need people to stay in the field. I need people to take care of me in the future. Like, I'm really inspired to make sure that this next generation is happy, healthy, physically as well as mentally, and continues to provide excellent care. So thank you very much for that. Is there any parting words, or are there any parting words that you would like to leave with our audience?
I'm just so happy to be on here talking with you. Dr. Miles Thomas is a superb example of how a urology career unfolds in amazing and excellent ways. Such an impressive person, has taken on different roles, including a treasurer-elect of the American Urologic Association. Just a real shining example of how someone can be in a practice and still explore other avenues and find lots of ways to have satisfaction and really elevate their peers. And so kudos to you for being that for everybody, as well as young urologists and really all urologists. So fun to
Well,
talk
thank
with you.
you.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. So thank you very much, Dr. Cohen, and thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us today.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
And I want to thank you also, our audience, for joining us at the AUA Leadership and Business Podcast. Until next time.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make AUA Leadership in Business your go-to podcast. Subscribe today by searching AUA Leadership in Business on your favorite podcast app and enhance your leadership and business education needs.